Good morning. Today we're going to go over your Chapter 19.1 homework. That'll be your only assignment that we have today, so there'll be nothing really for you to turn in. As we're looking at the title of this chapter and kind of what's going on in Section 1, we'll see that technology is going to lead the way. So the age of inventions and inventors is kind of what spurs growth in this first couple of sections. So I'll type these things in. Hopefully you've already completed this assignment. Too far. And as we go through, it says how many railway lines crossed the country by the 1890s? So that answer should be 5. If I can type in here 5. So we had one, May 10th, 1869, Promontory Point, Utah. That was the completion point of the first transcontinental railroad. And less than 21 years later, we have 5 railroads going across the country. So this really puts in perspective how important travel was and efficient travel was to the country's growth. So while we're looking at early growth, it was going to be mostly filled by the railroad and railroad manufacturing. Towns popped up around railway stops, and railroads still had to stop, we said, for water and other essentials throughout the trip. Next question says, by 1900, how many miles of track had been added to the existing 30,000 miles? So this was kind of a math problem, and either way, I'm okay with it. So you could have 2 answers. So if you put $250,000 on your homework that you turned into me on Tuesday, that would be okay, except for it said how many had been added to the existing. So by 1900 we had 250,000 miles of track, so we had to do a math problem, and if you're thinking about taking that Scholar Bowl test, please let me know. So that answer should be, whoops, there we go, not teaching math anytime soon, 220,000 miles of track. Now if we were in class, we're mentioning where is a lot of that track going to be built. We hope you're thinking closer to out west or maybe in the south. And we'd maybe ask you why if we're in class right now, because a lot of that track was destroyed during the Civil War, and also we wanted to connect those areas out west. How did Vanderbilt become a railroad baron? That's Cornelius Vanderbilt. Now, as we mentioned a couple names, we mentioned James J. Duke last chapter. You know him now because he's the Duke University big donor, and they named a college after him. Same thing with Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. So while we're looking at the next one there, how did he become a baron? And this is kind of tells you where the answer was here. It says railroad barons. So if you're following along kind of with your book, that's where you'd find that answer. So he became a railroad baron by gaining control of the North Central line and then consolidating several companies. So he did 2 things. Control over the North Central line and consolidated. So consolidate is a vocab word that we used in this chapter. Consolidated, if you're paying attention, it's combining separate companies in an industry. So it's kind of like if Walmart and Kmart combined, they call themselves Walcart. And what would that mean for us? That's right. Prices would be, would they be higher or lower? This is where it gets into the tricky part of the question. So part of today, in the next couple of days, we'll be looking at guys that eliminated the competition by gaining control of several different companies, and if that happens, we generally say they are going to do very well. So Walmart might even raise prices. They don't have anybody to compete with anymore. Next, what happened around 1880 that stimulated the steel industry? And we'll be looking at steel people in Section 3 with Andrew Carnegie. But in 1880, they used tracks made of steel. Steel was stronger, but however, it was still a problem. If you happen to know somebody that works on the railroad, and yes, that is still a job today, there are some people that to go through and kind of drive the tracks, because in the summertime, tracks can move quite a bit because of the heat and the expansion. So to make sure that a train will not derail, sometimes you'll see those little vehicles driving across the tracks. That's just to gauge the width, or the standard gauge of how far the tracks are apart, so railroads or rail cars don't derail. The next one, improving railroads. What allows faster shipment for goods is the standard. So standard gauge. The standard gauge was just a way to say how far the tracks are apart. And at some point, I'm sorry, I misspelled gauge. At some point, they had some tracks that had narrow locomotives with narrow wheels on them, so all the trains and all the tracks had narrow wheels, and they had some wider ones. So when we're looking at the positives and negatives of these things, one of them is now they don't have to take all the goods off of one train and put it on another. So we're going to be able to move them from point A to point B a lot faster and more cheaply. There were 4 technological inventions in this chapter as it went to the railroad. One of them was air brakes, and in case I gave you a quiz over this, if we were in person, a guy named Westinghouse, George Westinghouse, invented air brakes. Now you can probably hear air brakes when you're near a semi and they go to stop or they go to start moving again. You might hear a so that is just the air brakes locking in. Janney invented car couplers. These are the things that kind of connected it together, so much stronger than a trailer hitch. Eli Janney is credited with that. Let's see. Oh, refrigerated railroad cars, because this was, again, just a dream. But being able to ship your, like meat and everything to places without it ruining is a very big invention here from Swift. We may have to insert a new card here. So, Swift and refrigerated railroad cars. I think it's Granville Swift. Let me check. And finally, the last one is the sleeping car by a guy named Pullman. Sleeping and dining car. So, sleeping and dining cars were invented by a guy named Pullman, and this was going to make a new layer of travel for people going across the country, because it could take almost 2.5 days to get from point A to point B. People would like a little bit of a nap and dinner. Secret discounts for big customers on large railroads are called rebates. So rebates, I think of Menards and that song that plays in Menards all the time. You get to mail in a rebate. So for large customers like oil and steel and coal producers, they got good discounts. However, individuals got high prices. How did the railroad eliminate competition in its region? They all got together and had a pool. Now, these secret pools are these agreements between railroad companies, and they kind of say, well, hey, for these people, we'll charge this much. And it's easier instead of trying to always undercut each other. And that's kind of how some gas stations do it today. They might say, okay, well, if gas is $2.50, I'm going to charge $2.49. And then if the guy next door sees me doing that, he might charge $2.48 to get a bunch of people in his store, and they keep going back and forth. The railroad realized, hey, this just costs them money. So what they're doing, are going to do, is to get together and say, okay, well, I'll charge $2.75 if you charge $2.75. So their business scheme was going to actually pay off in big dividends for the railroad people, while making it very difficult for the small-time consumers. Next one, in what area did the American industry expand because of the growing railroad network? I think this is kind of a no-brainer. West, and westward expansion is going to be a theme for the next couple of chapters. This was your POD today. After farmers settled the Great Plains, where was the manufacturing center for agricultural equipment? And Illinois is one of them. So while we're looking at Illinois and these northern places, this is kind of where we were going to move some of our farming manufacturing. It's just shipping it less. And also Wisconsin is added on there. The last question was how, after the invention of the railroad and the time zones, how did Americans change the way they thought about time and distance? So instead of saying it's 500 and so many miles, hey Siri, how many miles is it to Chicago?
It looks like Chicago is about 309 miles away by car.
So instead of saying that Chicago is 309 miles away by car, they'd be more concerned with how many hours it would take to get there. So Siri says it's going to take about 4.5 hours to drive to Chicago. I think she's lying, because it seems like every time I've driven there, there's been a lot of road construction. So as train travel became more common, people became measuring distances on how many hours the trip would take versus how many miles. So how long it would take versus the miles traveled. So make sure you're keeping up with the individual stuff. We're going to be looking at some inventions tomorrow in class, as we're going to take some notes over the next couple days. Usually then is when we get to do some experiments and work with batteries and stuff. It'd really be nice if we got to come back on Monday and we could do those things in person. However, while we look at these things, make sure that you're staying on top of your assignments, doing all your PODs. If you need something, send me an email. And until then, we'll see you when we see you.